Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, a new podcast where we share inspiring stories on a wide range of cultural and social issues worldwide. This season highlights artists and curators of color from across the globe. We speak on identity, self-love, healing, and what it means to be Black in America and the world at large, as seen through the lens of visual arts and education. Today, we are joined by the bright emerging star Khari Turner. The 29-year-old MFA Columbia student is back in New York, fresh off the heels of his Artist in Residence program in Venice, California at Iris Project Residency. At the time of this recording, he was still in Venice, California. On this episode, we sat down to discuss some of the special aha moments that led to art in his life, discovering oneself as an emerging artist through style, materials, and developing concepts, and switching roles between teacher and student. He's currently a teacher's assistant in Columbia's MFA program and worked as an art director of a local camp in his hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The first time I saw Khari's work, I was looking through the IG stories of John Gray from Ghetto Gastro. The baby blue do-rag, brown nose, and full lips jumped out at me immediately, and as my gaze lingered, light, flowing brushstrokes like water surrounded the nose and mouth, forming the shape of a face. I would later learn that the water I saw was an integral part of Turner's work. I was instantly blown away. I just knew I had to talk to the man who'd created the stunning painting I couldn't take my eyes off of. Let's go. One of the questions I want to ask you is if you could describe any aha moments that you've had in your life that have led to your work as an artist. Can you talk a little bit about those?
The earliest memory that I have is definitely with my grandfather, who was a draftsman at this company. So, and while he was home, he would do this woodworking, and he would also when I asked him to, he would draw me things, and then I would try to recreate them. So that was the first, and then it transformed into me as a child in school, seeing other people draw, and then taking interest in that, and then going into middle school, and I was bullied in middle school. However, I knew how to draw. So bullies, they really appreciated the things I could make. Drawing was also an avenue to get out of situations like that. In Milwaukee, for sure, Lake Valley Camp, which was a camp that I started in 2005 and then kept going from being a teenager to an adult to then becoming the art director at the camp, was really influential because through that whole way, it gave me all the steps that I needed to be, inspired and also have more confidence in myself. Again, I was bullied, but it was only 2 weeks and I really felt like it was my freedom or my place to be. So anytime I went, it allowed me to kind of open up. And so that opening up happened gradually over the years and to the point where I'm secure with who I am. This past summer was probably the biggest change in all of the work. Everything prior to this was me just building up my talent or building up my experience and building up my abilities. Undergrad is really never too much about creating and developing concepts to the work. I was older when I went into undergrad. So I was 24 when I went back to undergrad. And so I got in knowing that I was gonna focus on making sure that I can get to grad school. So that summer, right before grad school, I immediately took to the summer residency at Chautauqua. And basically that whole 7 weeks, I pretty much was in the studio every day thinking testing myself and really trying to push myself into what is art or what am I even talking about? Why art? Why painting? Why not sculpture? Why not film? Because before all of this, I was talking about criminal justice and whatnot. So I was thinking about all the work that I was making. I ended up coming out with this idea that I work with now, which is the nose and lips that I started in undergrad as representations of celebration and Blackness, but also in conversation around people with wider noses and thicker lips and darker skin statistically getting longer prison sentences in the United States. So working with that positive and that negative in the art. And then what I did is take all the social justice out of the art and made it into me trying to work at Rikers before COVID and stuff hit, but putting up a show of people who have been incarcerated art and an online exhibition, having that go up, potentially curating more opportunities for people who have been incarcerated who are making art to show and sell their work has been the second part of that. So I took out all of the questioning about like what is the art doing, transformed that into what can I do, and then took everything that I was really focused on, created an entire center around celebration of Blackness, and then pushed all of that out.
How do you think the location and environment you grew up in shaped your current perspective on art and your place in the world as an artist and also as a Black male in America?
I've always been attracted to nature, especially after the whole Lake Valley camp situation. That took basically all of us that was in urban areas in one way or another on free or reduced lunch, and then took us into the woods in the middle of nowhere with pretty much no service for 2 weeks. The longer you go into the program, the longer you're out in the woods. And so that translated to everything that the Black men in my life were doing. So my grandfather was a draftman. He was the only Black person at the place that he worked at. My uncle, everything that he wanted, he would go for. And so these are the people that I was really, really paying attention to. They were, in my face and around. Now, there's obviously all types of other people that were around because it was Milwaukee. There's a lot of crime there. There's a lot of drugs. I'm one of the only males in my family on my grandmother's side that has not been to jail. So it's like one of those situations where all of my other cousins have gone to jail. And I'm the oldest of my siblings. So my little brother, I just got to make sure that he stays on his path and he's good. But it's like knowing that all of the rest of them had maybe, the same dreams as me. And then, one thing changes is always in the back of my mind. That was really where the start of working on social justice and prison reform came from, is because that experience or their experience in a way, which I never got the opportunity to ever tell them that, but it's just one of those things that I constantly think about. Either way, that's where I'm at in my head, is like I self-reflect often because of the influences of my grandfather and my uncle, but also try to push myself as hard as I can, but I also want to know and do some type of activism because of the relationship with my cousins and Milwaukee in a greater sense.
What kind of impression would you say your grandfather had on your life when you were growing up as a young man?
He was the biggest. There's anybody that I ever would have attributed to being my biggest influence, it would definitely be my grandfather. Out of all the people that have been in my life, which I love everybody, but he was drawing and he would draw and I would pick up on that. But also he was making stuff for our family. My grandmother, like if I needed a TV stand, my grandfather would make it because I live with my grandparents fairly often. Yeah, everything that he was doing for the house and like every aspect of being a Black man and like a respectable Black man was displayed through him. So it was like he was a really good influence because what he did for the family was always look out for somebody else or take care of other people. And he married into my family, like he married my grandmother. So it felt like he was like my father right away because also I didn't grow up with a father, so it was like he was that person for me.
Next, I want to talk a little bit about you as an emerging artist. And I wanted to ask you about your use of materials and your sense of composition. So, essentially, how you structure a piece and some of the tools that you use. And then I'd like to ask a little bit about how that process has continued to evolve for you over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. If we're talking about years, then it really is breaking down to the bare bones of charcoal to acrylic paint to oil paint, into now multimedia influences and things. Before, I was just doing all charcoal drawings. For a long time, I was doing just all charcoal drawings. It wasn't very expensive. And then right when I got into undergrad in 2015, I had really picked up painting. Everything was trying to get better at painting. At least a good 2 years, I just really focused on trying to get my painting up. Like in undergrad, they definitely try to make you think about what are you using and why are you using it. But if you have a good message, then, or if the content of whatever you're making looks like a certain thing or has a certain thing going for it already, then it's not as big of a concern. I take those little things and now I put it into work. So now I'm working with ocean water as a conversation about history and blackness to water and its connection, because there's a lot of problems with how black people interact with water already because of lower income neighborhoods not having access to water, Flint, Michigan, and all these other places. But at the same time, there's also places that are close to these areas where water is determined by, your closeness to wealth. So you don't have a beach house. You don't get to really travel to water. You don't have a backyard pool, which also then leads to you not learning how to swim. If there is some type of pool area in a park near you, it's usually not an actual pool. It's maybe like one of those fountain type things, where it just like sprays water, but but that's it. And so like black people have such a connection to water spiritually that you can't hone in on, because the connection to you in actual water, like in distance, is always far. And usually you don't learn how to swim, so you don't even get in water. Yeah, ocean water. I'm using oil paint still, but I'm also using acrylic paint. And then I'm mixing ink into it now, and other materials, just to try to like add in different textures, different ways of making, and then also just trying to think about different ways I can incorporate more water into the work that is not just tap water. So that's the biggest thing.
I was reading about your bio where you said that growing up in Milwaukee, you were close to water, and that had it left a big impression on you, and also being close to nature. Immediately, I just started thinking about the Middle Passage, this huge part of African American history that is completely centered and like rooted around traveling by water, and this knowledge that many African people died in the Middle Passage, and so you have this kind of like spirituality of ancestry, right, and like bloodlines of people, and like the spiritual aspect of life that's been lost. And it, is also like, how do you get back to your own roots? Like, how do you ever get back to the true heritage or the true knowledge of where you come from? In order to do that, you have to travel by this great body of water. And so there were just so many different elements that came to my mind, and how powerful your pieces are, because they have this incredible flow like water. And so that was why I was so curious to understand why you choose certain kinds of materials, and also like this experimental phase of like adding inks or adding thinners or adding like different kinds of elements that can change the texture or consistency of the material that you're using. It's kind of fascinating to understand, well, what is the artist thinking, right? What is the message that they are trying to convey? Diving a little bit more into that, I wanted to ask, how do you choose your subjects?
That is a good question. Because in all honesty, I don't choose anybody. I usually get chosen from one way or another. I'm like a super big believer in karma and fate and destiny. And a lot of the pieces I like have dreamt of me doing before I ever did them. And it wasn't until I finished them where I was like, oh, I made. So I won't do anything. I'll just be perusing, social media or some old pictures from something I follow, and then, an image will come up and I go, oh, I gotta paint this. Or I'll think, oh, I might not paint this now, but let me screenshot this, hold it in my phone, and maybe I'll paint this later. The subject isn't even always the same, because sometimes I'll use a hand gesture or emotion that I really like, and then maybe I'll change up the skin tone a little, or I might make the face a little bit different. Really not often, but there's always a possibility that, from image to mind to canvas or paper, that it changes. As well as, like, I was talking to somebody yesterday about the idea that artists continuously draw self-portraits all the time in their work, even if it's just like shapes or something, because the face that you see the most is always your own face. If I'm doing something, sometimes the nose will look a little bit wider, and I gotta think like, oh, that might just be my nose, or the skin might be a little bit darker, and might be my skin right there. But at the end of the day, like, it's always gonna be, because it's only the nose and the lips and the work. I want it so that anybody can enter the work without having to do mental gymnastics to figure out, oh, who is this person? I don't want you to think about the person as a specific, but as a global or a universal. Like if I do like a picture of a woman with an afro, or a person who may be trans that has an afro, or a male that has an afro, nobody will know what that person's sexuality or gender is. They'll just know that that person has an afro, and usually associate their afro with their blackness in a way that only our hair really stands straight out of our head like it does. Which Kehinde Wiley used to do these like portraits of people and then have these like crazy afros that like felt like clouds. And I always think about those in the way that he talked about, the relationship to hair and Africanness and blackness. So it's one of those things where if I like the hair or something, then I'll take that and make sure that that is a key factor in the work. But if it's not anything specific to the head shape, but I just want to keep the nose and the lips, then I'll keep that by itself. And then I'll just make the area around it an abstraction as like a sign of energy into the person. But if it's like specifically, and I really like the head shape, or the hair, or maybe even the accessories that the person is wearing, then I'll make sure that those are like spotlights in the work. So that's how I pretty much choose on that part.
Nice. I like that. I like what you said also about an artist always adding an element of a self-portrait in their piece. I think that's a really interesting and cool point, that the artist somehow always sees themselves in the work. For me, just in the kind of things that I do, there are these periods where you kind of lose sense of time, and then you look up and you're like, oh shit, like 8 or 9 or 10 hours has gone by. I've been locked in my studio for 24 hours. You step back, you look at your work, and you're just like, you're even blown away by how much you've poured into it. I just love that point that you made. Adding to that, and I feel like you kind of have touched on it just now, but how, if at all, do you discover yourself through your work, and how do you feel your practice allows you to learn more about yourself?
Oh, that's so fun. I have done a bunch of research. Again, I don't remember when I saw it, but as a young boy, I was like, all right, how do I become the best version of myself? And like all these years, I really tried to discover like, who am I? What are my suppressed memories that I'm thinking about that I need to like make sure that I am aware of? Is there any unresolved traumas that I have? If I do have unresolved traumas, I need to resolve those. Lately, I've been trying to cry more. My face doesn't like it, but I've been trying to, like, if I feel it coming, to like let it go. And sometimes it takes forever to do that. And it's not that I don't think I should cry or that I feel like I'm weak crying, but these are things that I'm thinking about all the time. And so what I mean by, thinking about is in all of this, like me thinking about how do I become a perfect person, this is also at the same time that I'm working. Like you're by yourself the whole time you're making something, and you can have on music, but your thoughts are just gonna run usually. And then there's times where I will recognize something that makes me mad or angry, and then I have to resolve that with myself, where I go, okay, that made me mad, more mad than it should have. Why? And then I'll think like, oh, this is obviously a representation of the fact that, because of like one time somebody made me mad because of they like offered up an opportunity and some help for something, and it didn't come through, and then they blew me off multiple times, and I just did not like it. And I got more mad than I thought I was. But then I had to think, when I was younger, my mom, my sister broke my bedroom door, and I did not have a door to my bedroom. And my mom would tell me constantly, like, oh, we're going to get you a new door. We're going to get you a new door. My head realizes that I never really fully got over her not fulfilling promises that she would give to me about, a sacred space that I continuously lived in that could have easily been invaded. So, like, my connection to how I think about me not getting the bedroom door when I was younger, anytime somebody now then breaks a promise, it brings back a trauma that has like a trigger to me in my head. So all of this is to say that when I'm painting, I'm meditating. I don't ever sit down and do the whole thing. I'm constantly thinking and reflecting as I'm painting and just trying to figure out a way to allow myself to feel the things that I feel, but to acknowledge, how that affects me. Because spiritually, like I feel like meditation through painting has been amazing for me. But it wasn't until I was older that I realized I was meditating. I just thought I was thinking and that everybody did this, and then I would ask, and people were like, "No, I don't do that." so yeah.
Talking to other people and discovering that what you're doing is meditating while painting, and that you come to find out that everyone else is not doing that. One, what's interesting to me about that is that even though we're all linked by this singular human experience, we are all incredibly different as human beings. And then another part of that is the maturity that it takes to recognize yourself. When I'm taken back to this memory of like not having the door and not having this safe space, this manifests in my life today in a certain way. That deep awareness of who you are and yourself is so important. One of the really incredible things about art and why art is so important is that it allows that situation to even be available to you. Even if you don't get there, or it takes years to get to that place of self-awareness and discovery, through art, you have the platform for that to grow. And that is so incredibly necessary within like the Black community in America, hands down. I mean, and we can talk about brown communities, we can talk about all communities of color, marginalized people. As a young Black woman who grew up in New York City and saw arts programs were just being completely slashed from public schools, and also being around people who were artistic so that I could express myself freely, art is essential to growth, to development, and to like deeply understanding yourself and your place in the world, So it's just, it's just beautiful to hear you share your different experiences, and see how universal they are. I just wanted to really learn about how you are experiencing and growing as an emerging artist, and how is that taking form and taking shape for you. And the next topic that I wanted to get into is these ideas of being a student and a teacher. There was a Zoom meeting between Helen Molesworth and Deanna Lawson. Deanna Lawson has been an associate professor at Princeton for like the last 8 years. And, one of the best schools in the country, and she's such an incredibly powerful photographer, and she has such a rich perspective and point of view. And Helen, there was a question that was posed during this call, which was essentially like, what is it like to straddle the worlds of your role when you are a teacher, but also recognizing that like within your practice as an artist, you are eternally a student. To exist as a full artist, you have to always be learning, always kind of growing. I wanted to ask you, can you describe what it's been like for you to take on the role of a teacher, even as early as when you were doing it in camp, and more recently as a teacher's assistant in your MFA program at Columbia?
I think that being a teacher and a student is probably the biggest thing, because you're always going to learn regardless. I'm always learning something on Twitter. I don't know how people still have information that I have not heard yet, but it's out there. I think that being a student and being a teacher is great because you can use whatever you learn in practice immediately as an artist. Sometimes you learn things and they just might be random facts, but sometimes you'll see a student say something, and I know I've done this before as a student and then had it happen to me as a teacher, where you'll give something, especially if you're like learning traditional techniques to something. There always will be a student that goes, "Well, can't I just do this?" And then you go, "Uh, yeah, but nobody ever does that." It was like, "But can you do it?" And you're like, "Yeah, you can do it." And so then there's a whole new setup that is something that you would have never thought, because you learned it a certain type of way the whole entire time. I was in a lecture with Joyce Scott. She went to this place overseas and she was doing this glass project. And Joyce Scott was like, I went in there and asked him if I could do this way of making glass. And basically what she said about the glass setup is that she went in and talked to these people, and they were like, nobody does this. She just knew that glass could do a certain type of thing and wanted to test her theory on how that happen. And because of that, she created a whole new set of things that this old, like traditional glass company now end up doing, because she had something fabricated through that company and worked with that company to create like a whole line of glass art that was phenomenal. But it was one of those things where it's like only somebody who is outside of, maybe a traditional teaching role, like the glass company in this situation, came in with a woman who was a student, because she did not know much about glass. She came in with the ideas. They taught her some of the stuff, but she also then challenged them on some of the things that they were doing. So being a student and a teacher is being able to use the things that I learned from students immediately. And that's like the fun part about being a teacher and a student. Plus, if you're working with younger kids, they just say the funniest thing. It's great.
I love that. What are some of your fondest memories from your art teachers, and what have been some of your most challenging moments, like as being a student?
Ooh, that's hard. Because the thing about it is that my fondest memories as a student have always been the ones that are supposed to be like the detrimental ones. I think about Biggie and him talking about how his teacher told him he wasn't gonna be nothing, and then he turned around and was like, "I'm gonna be something." All the moments as like a student have been moments where a teacher's like, "I don't know if this is gonna work," and sometimes those ideas do not work, but maybe they work later. And so I've had like a couple of my teachers where they were like, "You're not going to be able to get this done." And then I did not get that thing done. However, what I did have was just as good, if not better, because the effort was put into doing something like that. But as a teacher, oh man, it's so many things that I love about being a teacher with like the kids I was working with at camp. Because the thing about it is, me growing up in the camp, as I like matured and aged, so did the kids I was already working with. So if I'm working with 9-year-olds at 17, when I get to 20, they're starting to pick up on some things. They're like 12 years old, and then maybe when I'm 24, those kids start working a little bit more. They have more responsibility. But if I'm working with maybe like 13-year-olds at 19, and then I get to like 25, and those 13-year-olds are of age, and so the things that I've been teaching them, they learn and start teaching the younger kids, or the 9-year-olds that they're working with. So it was really interesting as a teacher in that way, because this is, I think, the only opportunity where you get to grow with your students as well as they grow with you as the teacher. So it was like a unique experience, because when they hurdled over certain challenges, I could be there for that part.
Would you like to have more opportunities to teach as you get older and as you move forward in your career?
If I can, I want to do it how some other teachers have had in my life. I feel like it's always great to come in, drop a bomb, and then like leave. It's just if I can, I would want to do like workshops and stuff like that, because I think that those little moments when you only have a certain amount of time, you push really hard to get something done. Like we at Austin Peay State University had Sonia Clark come and teach for a semester. However, she couldn't stay there the entire time. But when she came in, she would just drop a bomb and then be like, "All right, I'm gonna be back next month." Like so she would come in and basically just come in with the most grace you've ever seen anybody. When you ever hear somebody talk about black girl magic, you assume what they mean. We would be in a conversation and she would stop somebody in the middle of a conversation if somebody interrupted them, and look the person dead in their eye and then go, "You take your power back." It was the greatest, because it was the softest and kindest voice, but it was like, "If you want this, you are going at it at full force. Make sure you take your power and your stance in all of this," which is great. A lot of women, actually, that I would say, a lot of women in that class who felt like there was an opportunity to speak up more than before. Like I always in undergrad felt like there was a lot of men always talking, and that was like one of those things where it's me again trying to think like, how do I interact with everything going around me? And so like I talk, but like I also will try to like pull myself back from talking because I need to allow other people to say something. And sometimes, specifically in this class with Sonia Clark, it was 4 guys, and then every single other person in the class was a woman, which was like 20 other people. But the people you heard talking were always usually the guys, and then maybe those 3 or 4 girls that would just say something because they wanted to say something. So it's an interesting setup in classrooms, especially in like undergrad and maybe even sometimes in grad, where I try to like make sure that I'm me saying stuff, and I'm like, man, I am not making any space for the women in this classroom. And I have talked to a bunch of women about that, and like history of like silencing women in certain type of ways. So like women in our classes weren't speaking up because they were just used to not saying anything or giving their thoughts, and that was just, it was crazy to me, but at the same time makes complete sense. So it was like one of those things where me as a person has to realize that, and then try to like work on not being a man spreader. But yeah.
It's nice that you are recognizing these moments of mansplaining, or where you're in these environments and you can clearly see this like division of the gendered world that we live in, and like how, and the effect that not only has on you as you internalize that and create your own awareness for yourself, but what's happening, like why aren't those young women speaking up, and how do you get them to be more vocal, right, and to feel comfortable to say whatever they think and feel, especially in a classroom where if it's the right kind of classroom with the right kind of teacher, and that is a safe space for you. I love that you're thinking about those things. It's really wonderful. As we wrap up, what are you hopeful for in terms of the future, and what are things that you're looking forward to? This could be like actual projects that you have lined up, or it could just be like your thoughts about, where we are in the world, where you are as a person, things that you're hopeful or excited or passionate about.
Oh, there's so much. I'm a big believer in karma and in destiny and kind of blind passion. When I first went back to school in 2015, I knew that I was going to have to drop everything. So ever since then, everything in my life is continuously telling me you're on the right path. So much so that I see the numbers 222 every single where I go all the time. And it's an angel number that basically means keep going. And so I see that number constantly. It was also my favorite number when I was younger, which makes it so much crazier. But I think that my brain and my body and my life is telling me keep going on this path. You're working hard. More people are starting to acknowledge you. More people are starting to hear about you. More things are starting to pull out. You're getting contacted by people that you looked at as mentors for years now. So, like, there's no way for this to ever not be what your path is. So keep going. And so in my head, I don't think about anything else. I never had a plan B. It was always plan A. And then making plan B was trying to figure out how to make plan A work. In that way, I just got off the phone yesterday with a gallery that's in Milwaukee, and I'm supposed to have a solo slash like opening show at this like gallery slash lounge type place September 7th, and like solo show in Milwaukee.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, so like that, and then partner with my students as well. So Milwaukee Institute of Art and Designs. So yeah, now that I'm on this path, everything is starting to open up. I just opened a Christie show with with Destiny, and so those pieces in that show already sold.
Really?
Yeah.
How much is your work selling for now?
5,000.
Okay, amazing.
Which is great because it's still money for sure in my pocket, and with selling both pieces, like more opportunities come my way. But also that's important to me because the people who are collecting my work are Black. I have more Black collectors than I do of any other ethnicity. So with the Christie show, with the Milwaukee show that's coming up, and I'm doing some other work with Destiny. I love her. She's been amazing, really helpful. I have something else with her coming later this month. I then have a show. I'm supposed to be working with Band Devices. It's been going great. Like, I don't have any more work now. Like I got 3 pieces left to my name.
Isn't that crazy?
It's one of those situations where you imagine something happening and then it happens and you're like, man, this is a lot. So people love the work. Like I'm not doing in commissions. I'm just making whatever I want. I'm making the work because I really want to make the work. I'm not making it to please anybody else. I'm making it because this is what I'm passionate about and I need to just keep my head level and don't think about all the people who are now asking me for stuff. It's great that all these people are interested, but it's also all these people. So it's like, yay! Because I already know like, there's pieces I've already had that like 5 people will be like, I love that piece. I want that piece. Like my best pieces in my head or even some best pieces that maybe some other people think about. But at the end of the day, like I'm not putting out anything that I'm not proud of. There might be some things that I'm like not as happy with as others, but that's also part of the process. Like I don't make or do any sketches. I just make more works. Really, what's going on right now. So yeah, the January show, the show in September. I have another couple things in the middle, like little shows. I also have a. I'm actually having to get better at this. Yeah, undergrad did not prepare me, nor did grad prepare me for any of the things that I'm getting
You
right
mean
now.
like the
Because
business of
nobody.
the art world?
Oh
Right.
yeah, the business of the art world. The now I'm into making Google forms and filing all my work and making PDFs and making spreadsheets. I wasn't doing none of that. I was so it's been weird because I haven't had to figure out how to deal with that because usually that's not how it's supposed to go. Like I'm supposed to work and try to have like shows in all these places and then somebody eventually sees me and goes, we would like to talk. Instead, I've gotten it where it's like, hey, I like to talk to you. And you're like, I didn't even have a show yet. How are you finding me?
Well, that's how I found you. I'm telling you, like, I saw your piece. I think it was on the stories of John Gray from Ghetto Gastro. You did this piece with the do rag. I was just completely blown away. I was like, this reminds me of Black men I've seen my entire life, right? Like, it's instantly recognizable, it's instantly relatable for me. And I think a lot of Black people can see them, obviously, not just because of the depictions of wide noses and lips and skin color and hands and things like that, but it has this, I mean, for lack of a better term, it has like this street aesthetic that you can just, it's very relatable. And so I was like, I got to talk to this guy. Like, it was like immediate. I could see that when I saw your work, I just wanted to learn and know more about you. And so, one of the things you're talking about has me thinking about why young artists, especially young artists of color, like need mentorship and need like business training and need like financial training. And it's not just about your craft, it's about how do you manage yourself as an artist. Do you have the right kind of support system, the right kind of people around you? There needs to be more investment in that so that artists can protect themselves, protect their work, and really understand their worth.
Everybody in art wants to be so formal and traditional. It's like the climate is very, very different now, and it's not the same. Like I reached out to a couple other like really professional artists, and I'm like, what do I do about this and this? And they're like, just be in school and focus. Like, bro, I cannot. There's no way for me to only focus on my craft without even acknowledging all this other stuff and all these other areas that come with this, especially now with the way that they're treating younger artists, which is something to be leery about because the last thing you want to do is be a younger artist, just start getting out there, and then 3 years later, your work is in auction going for hundreds of thousands of dollars when you were just like worth 10,000 2 years ago or something. And you want your work to be represented in a way that through the growth of it, you can one day eventually have a whole show dedicated to the lifelong work you've been doing. But like you can't get there if you're getting too crazy too quickly. But it's like you can't nobody wants to teach you that in school because they just assume that, let's say I land into a great spot, somebody really famous gets my work, blows it up, I'm out there and people are super excited about all this stuff, and then my work goes for $25,000. Okay, great. Somebody's like, oh, I want that, and then they take it to auction without anybody putting up a waiver or just something, and they sell it for $100,000, and now I have to think about all the other price points of all my work because of one single thing. Because now everybody's like, well, if I get a piece, then I can sell it for $100,000, and then you're like, no, you cannot. Don't do that. That's not what I'm making the work for. I'm not trying to get famous in this type of way. Like you're trying to exhibit and you're trying to go around the world and experience things and grow as an artist. But yeah, this is stuff that nobody teaches you about. So it's like weird. You need to know.
Right. All the stuff that you did with Destiny. She put a really great post on Instagram. There's no laws, there's no rules that protect an artist's work from this kind of like poaching, right? I mean, essentially that's kind of what it is. Let's just call it what it is. An artist makes a piece of work, they sell it for 5,000, then it gets popularity, and somebody else is able to sell it at auction for 30 times that value. It's just such a weird and strange and scary cycle. And I think there needs to definitely be more advocacy and infrastructure around protecting artists from this kind of poaching, because it shouldn't just be like, let's, a get rich quick scheme. Art has so much deeper implications for society, politically, socially, economically, and I don't mean economically in this sense. I just mean that it has implications of how people can live and see the world in a different way. And if we just commodify it and capitalize on it so much, I think it starts to lose some of what makes it so precious. So I really love that Destiny put that up. And so I feel like we need more. Not only do we need more young Black female curators to really share their voice and their unique perspective about their experience in the world, not only as women, but as Black women, and how, the ideas of what Blackness is and what the Black experience is such a rich and full range of experiences, because you have Black people all over the world, African people all over the world who identify in so many different ways. And so, to know that Destiny did her show in was it Sweden or Switzerland? Yeah. And just to see that incredible diversity of African artists, of Black artists across the globe, such a beautiful expression of all of the rich and diverse creativity that there is out there among Black talent. So I think that we're going through a very special moment, but I also feel like it's a moment where there has to be an understanding of like protecting art and artists, and also like knowing your own worth as a creative person and not being taken advantage of.
Yeah, with all of the changes that are happening right now, she's doing an amazing job of making sure that there's so many diverse voices. To have her putting on shows with all these different narratives and all these different works and people is amazing.
Absolutely. I also wanted to ask, how did you guys get connected?
Same way, she's found me on because somebody else posted me, and then she saw something they posted and came to my Instagram and was like, "Oh, I like this," and then reached out. It's crazy, and it's only getting better because of, like, this is the worst, but also the greatest thing, because I've done so much more because of COVID, because everybody is now on their phones and cannot see art in person, that they're looking online, and because of that, like at the beginning of this year, I had somewhere around like maybe like 2,000 followers. Now I got almost 20,000. I never asked for anything. I keep telling you, all I'm doing is making work. It's been great. I know for a fact if this is what's happening without me putting in any extra outside of me just working, then this is what I need to be doing. So it's been great.
Yeah, there was something that you said earlier about seeing a number, seeing that number 222. That's obviously like your number. And I don't know if you're a very spiritual person, but for me that immediately read, that's like a spiritual thing, right? That's your guides, that's ancestry, that's letting you know wherever you are out there in the world, here's a little reminder that you're on the right track and you're on the right path. And so I have those kinds of situations that happen to me often. I've become aware of those kind of signs. When I was a younger person, when I was a younger woman, things like that would happen to me. There would be this serendipitous nature to my life, and I didn't give it the kind of weight that it deserved, and I probably just didn't really even know what was happening. But now that I've had a heightened awareness, and I think I'm more of a spiritual person, I see signs for what they are. It's beautiful to hear you say that, because to just do the work, to just simply share your work with the world and to be as well received as you have been and are going to continue to be as you move forward. Not only is it such a blessing, but it reinforces what you may already know or like have a slight inkling of about yourself, which is like in those moments, if there are any, this is something I struggle with, but if there are any of those moments of doubt, that you can let go of that doubt because you see those signs around you pointing you in the right direction, showing you that you're moving in the right way, and then that your confidence is then reinforced and you can just move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so glad we had you on the show. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I'll tell you, my last artist talk was almost 2 hours. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. And I look forward to, like watching you grow, watching you develop as an artist. And I just wish you much success.
Thank you. Same to you as well.
It's a wrap, folks. That was our episode with Khari Turner, the bright star you're sure to see more of in the coming months with shows and exhibitions coming up throughout the year. Keep your eyes on this young talent. For more information on Khari, you can check him out on his IG account at khari.rahim, and you can learn more about him at kharirahim.com on his IG page. The links are also going to be in the description box of the podcast, plus a few other galleries and special people who were mentioned on this episode, like Sonia Clark and John Gray. Check us out on our next episode as we continue to connect with young artists and curators of color from across the globe. As always, stay motivated, stay inspired, and stay up. Peace and love, y'all. We out. This episode was recorded in New York City with me in LES and Khari in Venice, California, while finishing up his residency at Iris Project Residency. This season, our music has been mixed and produced by Leon Kojo, and our audio has been edited by our in-house team here at Lightwork. You can learn more about Kojo and the music he produces in the link to his SoundCloud in the description box of this podcast. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Lightwork Presents Everything is Connected, conversations on culture and current events with some of today's most exciting creative contemporaries.